In the chamber this week, just call me Han because I'm riding solo. We're revisiting a favorite historical topic, talking about what happens when a character achieves an original quest, and discussing 5 mighty lions. All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Hello everyone. Like I said, this is Joe recording solo this week, mainly for a couple of reasons. One, our schedules have just been absolutely bonkers. This week in particular, picked up some extra shifts. Cody is in the middle of, the busy season at his job. And on top of everything else, we're kind of hit with a secondary S, which is Cody is still a sick man. Oh, apparently his voice is just shot. I haven't actually talked to him with his voice, which I suppose makes sense considering that, he's not here right now. So I'm kind of riding solo this week, so apologies in advance. There's not going to be a video game section, so if that's your favorite section of our podcast, perhaps turn it off now, I suppose. Or don't do that, please. No, just stick with us. We're here maybe you can enjoy listening to other things that Joe has to talk about. Oh boy. So yeah, I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about the nerdy stuff that I've been getting up to this week. There's been a few things. I started a book that chances are I'm going to have to renew from the library just for a lot of reasons, which is called A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is the first in a series of books, and it is another in sort of a growing line of kind of like blue-collar science fiction. So obviously I think when people think of blue-collar science fiction, the number one biggest thing that they think of is Firefly, because, it's a group of smugglers out in the Outer Rim who's taken, odd jobs here and there, and, they're working, they're always running out of fuel, and they're working double, triple jobs just to keep themselves fed. And of course, Mel has the heart of gold, so he's not taking jobs that would, be profitable, but at the same time, would really compromise his own personal morals or integrity. I think that, the kind of summation of that too would be in the Expanse book, although that's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, just because, the Expanse, much like Game of Thrones, follows different people at kind of all income levels throughout the universe. However, most of our lens as an audience member is we're kind of observing things in the belt. We very briefly, or we go on Earth for a good chunk of book 2, and, we see Mars and stuff, but for the most part, we're out in the belt, which has more or less taken the role of the third world in this futuristic space colony, or the space universe. And A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, at least at the beginning, where I am right now, I'm a good chunk in, about, I would say, 50 or so pages in. It is following a crew of people whose job it is to punch the wormholes that are eventually going to be used for wonderful interstellar travel. So if you've ever played like Mass Effect or games like that, or anything that kind of has an FTL capability, this book is following the people whose job it is to go out into the void and more or less just punch the holes into space. This book came highly recommended to me from a friend because it has a lot of genuine sincerity to it. That's his words, where it's a bunch of people working together and trying to figure out just how to work with one another. So you have kind of 2 main Earth factions. You have aliens that have, weird languages that involve precise sign language on top of, speaking and things like that, and if your hand motions aren't exactly correct, then you could get in a lot of trouble. You might be saying something inadvertently offensive or racist or things like that. And so I guess it's kind of like a blue-collar sci-fi series meets Star Trek, in that you do have these wonderful, fantastical alien races combining with just working class Joes trying to make a buck and keeping their spaceship flying as they punch the holes through the world. So that's the main thing I've been up to. I've been watching lots of other stuff as well. I'm still watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which has gotten very good. I'm still in season 2, so I'm still early on, but I kind of see where everything's going from here, and it's starting to get really intriguing. And yeah, outside of that, still playing D&D, working through some video games, and just watching lots and lots of stuff. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into some of our wonderful little sections that I'm going to talk about this week. And we're going to start off with a question from one of our listeners. If you guys have listened to us before, we encourage you to join up with us on our various social media, which I will be talking about in the middle section of the podcast, and will probably be redacted by Cody. But we will answer the questions that you send to us, so that we can, get you part of the conversation. And so we're going to be revisiting one of my personal favorite topics, a topic that I know probably far too much about, probably already rolling your eyes if you've listened to an episode before this. I'm talking, of course, about pirates. So the main question that I'm kind of jumping off of from this point is a question asker asked, when was the transition between the golden age of piracy and the new contemporary age of piracy that we're experiencing today in 2018 and, throughout this time period? So as I mentioned in our pirate episode, most of my area of focus when I was doing my studies was on the Caribbean piracy, and the sort of section of when the pirates were most successful was from the 1660s to the 1730s. However, in the Caribbean, this actually went through the 1830s. So by the 1830s, at least in the Americas, and by the Americas I of course mean the American coast and the Caribbean islands, and to a lesser extent South America, we start seeing piracy going on a rapid decline. Now there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason is that during this time period, we start seeing people getting a little bit more serious about fighting pirates. So we sort of see the decline of use of mercenaries, and we start seeing rise of national armies in Europe. We start seeing sort of the rise of things like nationalism and things like that. And eventually, by the 1830s, we have enough military force that's all combining together to actually start to really combat pirates in a big, big way. Up until this point, pirates were pretty effective because, one, a lot of European powers were fighting with one another, which made it a lot easier for pirates to kind of, just do hit and run missions and things like that. Fun fact for you American history lovers out there, it was actually an international conflict that allowed the newly Americans formed government to probably at least have the War of 1812 be considered a stalemate, because at the time, Great Britain was fighting this guy named Napoleon, who you may or may not have heard of. And yes, Napoleon was kind of, taking them to task. So weighing their options between a guy who is going through Europe and kind of challenging their way of life from right across the English Channel versus, a group of upstarts from across an ocean that was really hard to get across and things like that, they opted to go for fighting Napoleon. And the only reason I mention this is just because a similar thing happened here. As countries were starting to stop fight one another, at least, egregiously, they now had more time to focus on pirates, and they started moving and kind of squeezing out the pirates, especially in the Caribbean. Now, something that maybe was misinterpreted or misconstrued, or perhaps not, and you guys are smarter, we start seeing piracy never truly goes away. It just kind of adapts to situations and things like that. So in the Caribbean, things are starting to get a little bit harder for pirates and piracy to exist. However, there was a group called the Barbary Pirates, who were a group of Moorish pirates from the Muslim world who were kind of raiding and fighting along the coast of North Africa, the African Atlantic coast, and fighting along the African coasts, and of course the Mediterranean Sea. That's the one I'm looking for. So these pirates were fighting along the Mediterranean Sea, and they had their sort of main ports in places like Rabat, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. So, much like our friends in the Atlantic pirates, the Barbary pirates were attacking what was rich trade routes, and were attacking, along the lines of trying to get the best goods for themselves and things like that. Now, of course, they moved over to South America periodically. However, most of their activity was spent along the African coast. And it was the Barbary pirates that actually were one of the first times that the newly formed American state got involved in an international conflict. So if you ever listen to the songs of the Marines, it starts off from the Halls of Montezuma, to the shores of Tripoli. Tripoli was actually one of the main bases of operations against the Barbary pirates, and during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, we actually sent our navy across the ocean to fight the Barbary pirates that were attacking American interests along the coast of Africa and things like that. So this is called the Barbary Pirate Wars. Like I said, this is one of the very first times we start seeing the American military, kind of getting involved in what is called a fun little story. Thomas Jefferson, as you may or may not know, was quite fond of learning about other people's cultures and things like that, and so he had learned about these small, very maneuverable boats that were nicknamed, kind of rudely, the Mosquito Fleet, that were, according to some people, infamous for kind of being washed up on shore if the squalls were particularly too big, because mosquito fleets were great for areas that weren't along open oceans, so not the best call in the entire world. But, piracy is one of those things that's probably always going to exist, at least as long as they're unaffected or unaltered capitalist waterways and trading and things like that. So, as the world advanced, so too did piracy. And once again, piracy tends to and will probably always attract the same people throughout. So people who are people who are poor, who don't have a lot of opportunities in the world, things like that. Much like Black Bart Roberts from the golden age of piracy, given a life between hard work and not gaining much, or a life that, had plenty and satiety and a little bit more, happiness with only the fear of being punished. Many and most will choose that life of relative ease. There's no guarantee that, the life is going to be much better in one way or the other. So, like I said, as we kind of advance through our history, we start seeing pirates getting more and more impacted with contemporary weaponry. They use small, fast speedboats. But the main sort of difference I like to draw, and once again, this is something that I haven't done too excruciatingly amount of hard research on, but I have read articles and I've read snippets of a very interesting book where a man actually went and lived amongst the contemporary Somali pirates for a while. My main takeaway is it seems to me to look and feel more like a kind of organized crime syndicate versus the golden age of piracy. And allow me to elaborate, because I can already hear some people like clacking on their keyboards and things like that. Everything in this contemporary version of piracy kind of all has like a central point where everything radiates down from there. So you have the central, authority figure who is giving out the orders to, maybe his lieutenants or his sub-lieutenants, and eventually this trickles down to the pirates, but all of their resources, they're able to keep a majority of it, but it's all kind of being channeled upward to one central authority. Whereas in the case of the golden age of piracy, we have more people working towards, or more individual ships working for the interests of one another and their own individual crews. There was no central authority pirate king or anything like that. Nor was there, like I said in the original episode, a central authority or set of rules. So that's just my main takeaway is, the technology has gotten a lot better, and the way that the systems themselves are organized have become relatively different as well as we've gone through time. So I want to thank the person who sent in that question. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light. I'm personally actually working myself on doing more research into the Barbary pirates, mainly because my knowledge of piracy outside of the Caribbean is limited, and I know that there's lots of really interesting stories, especially throughout the Barbary coast and in the Asian world of pirates out there. So this is something that I personally am doing more research on as well. But I feel like maybe my implication was that piracy disappeared for a while, and then kind of reemerged magically, in the modern era, you're always going to have something that resembles piracy, no matter the time period, no matter where you are. There are some historians who cheekily refer to it as the oldest occupation, although you need other occupations for it to exist. But it's one of the oldest occupations in the world is piracy. So, thank you so much for sending in your question. Hopefully, it shed a little bit of light on it, like I said. And we're going to move into, briefly, the middle section. Middle section. Hey, it's the middle section. Middle section. What time is it? It's middle section time, where Joe tells you about the places you can visit us. People probably have skipped over this part by now. Oh man, I can only imagine Cody's face when he's listening to the raw audio of this one. If I was lucky, if I was a betting man, I just see him like face palming so hard right now and saying, "Why did I ever ask Joe to do a solo episode? This was the biggest mistake of my entire podcasting career." But as I just said, that last section came to us primarily from a listener, much like you are doing right now. So, if you want to get in contact with us, there's a couple of ways to do it. The first way is to send us an email at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. We check that periodically. You can also go onto Twitter, which I'm actually now starting to update a little bit more frequently, which is at fandomr_podcast on Twitter. The Facebook page is almost done. It exists, but there's one last thing I need to tweak on it, and then I'll make it live for you guys. At the moment, and probably from this point onward, we're probably going to keep it a closed group, so not everyone can get in, willy-nilly. You're going to have to wait for someone to let you into that. And we are on iTunes, which is kind of like everyone's main kind of podcasting area, so you can find us at Fandom Roulette. Please feel free to rate, subscribe, leave a star rating, give us a download, things like that. All these things help our numbers, and they help us start to go up in the rankings, which is cool for us because, this is a lot of fun, and it's cool to see people engaging with us. And if you don't know how that works, we are also on SoundCloud. That's where all of our raw audio goes up. It's on SoundCloud. And I know that there's a main website as well, which I believe is just fandomroulettepodcast.com. But I don't have that information in front of me right now, so yeah. We want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's always a joy to kind of like look at our numbers and watch, how we're doing. We like to see this thing. So thank you so much. And now that we're done with the middle section, I'm going to go back into the episode. So middle section. Who's that walking down the street? It's a kid, and they were randomly rolled. It's a garbage kid. Who's that? It's a garbage kid. Oh no, it's time for garbage kid. Alright, so I tried my hand this week at making a garbage kid using the wonderful D&D supplemental guide, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Everything? Why, yes, Joe, everything, because I'm going to make that joke even if Cody's not here.
Boo.
And chances are, Cody probably just sighed again and facepalmed a little bit. But hey, I'm here by myself, so you won't be able to hear that. So one of the coolest things about Xanathar's Guide to Everything is it actually gives you a wonderful, crazy, involved rolling tables to create a complete character from scratch. So if it's like the first time you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons and you literally have no idea where to begin, you could, in theory, sit down and roll on this table to give you all of the pertinent stuff that you need to build your own character. I know Cody also talks about this in terms of you can use this resource to create NPCs for your campaigns, although none of the characters that we have created so far have shown up in our main campaign. I know he has used others in other campaigns that he likes to DM. And so I tried my hand at it this week. I realized a little too late that the formatting of it isn't the most straightforward. So at the end, that's where you can roll on a race table and on a class table. I kind of devised my own system for that, so I just rolled a d10 for 1 to 9 were the original 9 races in the player's handbook, and then if I happened to roll a 10, I was going to jump over and do a similar role in Volo's Guide to Monsters, and then for the class and for the background, I also rolled, although in those cases they did correspond to a just normal, I think it was like a D8 and a D12 or something like that. But I want to introduce you to my newest, bestest friend in the entire world, bar none, Mabak Thrashish. Got that? His name is Mabak Thrashish. And Mabak Thrashish, because I'm going to say that name a lot, because I love it, is a half-orc paladin who is neutral good. Now, my good friend Mabak Thrashish knew who his parents were, and both of them were actually involved in his life. Mabak actually has a fairly wonderful life. So maybe in the future I need to start rolling the garbage kids, because listen to this, it's going to be a beautiful, fun story. This would be a wonderful NPC to throw in to like give your guys characters a main quest or something like that. So one of his parents was a human and the other was a half-orc. So I guess if you're playing along at home, that makes him more of a quarter orc, but hey, D&D, things get weird. My friend Mabak was born in the home of a healer or a midwife, so he was born in very safe, healthy lodgings and things like that. And he actually had two siblings, both of whom were older than he was. So he had a healthy, lovely family life. His family lived a nice, modest life, but they moved around a lot, so they never had a place to call their own. They kind of traveled to where the work was. See, I'm editorializing on this as I'm going through. He had several friends, and his childhood was generally a happy one. Now, my good friend Mabak was a guild artisan, and he became a guild artisan because he was always good with his hands, and he just took that opportunity to learn a trade. So he starts off by, making stuff. He's a skilled craftsman, and those craft skills started an early love. He probably took a little bit of time, and he started learning about the different religions as he was making these various crafts for the local temple districts and things like that. And he became a paladin because it was a natural consequence of his unwavering faith. In taking his vows, he became the holy sword of his religion. What religion? Why, that's for you, dear listener, to decide, depending on if you have your own, God's table or things like that. And so he is between the ages of 21 and 30, so for a half-orc, he's actually kind of getting up there in years. Right around 21, I believe, or I think a half-orc is considered mature at 17. They have a lifespan of about 70, so yeah, he's getting kind of up there in years, but he has had 4 life events. So his life events were boons, friendship, supernatural, and had a job in his trade, which gives him a little bit more starting wealth. But his boon was that he saved the life of a commoner who now owes him a life debt. This individual accompanies him on his travels and performs mundane tasks for him, but he will leave if he's neglected, abused, or imperiled. And this commoner's name is Thad. That's just a human. Maybe Mabak pushed him out of the way of a cart or something. In my head, Mabak isn't the most fond of Thad, but he was good company for a while, so he doesn't get in the way and he's not too in danger, so Mabak keeps him around. He made a friend of an adventurer, and this is just me kind of throwing in a little bit of fun for myself. That adventurer was a dwarf named Arthal. Arthal was, of course, my very first character, who was a dwarven barbarian and a grand adventurer. So that was just a little Easter egg that I threw in for fun. His supernatural experience was he visited a holy site and felt the presence of the divine there. I'd like to imagine that this happened a little bit right before he truly started becoming an adventuring paladin, and this is when he was given his noble task to go out and rid the world of evil. And like I said, he spent time as a guild artisan. The only real interesting thing mechanically that this does is it actually starts him out with a little bit of extra gold. But that is my good friend Mabak Thrashish, a half-orc garbage kid, which I think might be our first half-orc. And so this is just to show you that a complete backstory can be done just by rolling some die. Garbage kid, Garbage kid, garbage, garbage kid, garbage kid. Man, watching my levels is a fascinating thing. So anyways, diversion aside, I wanted to spend the RPG section to talk about something that is actually a brand new and unique experience for me, and I don't know if I quite have the answers. And so maybe Cody was going to say, no, we shouldn't talk about this, but hey, I'm riding solo, so I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. So at this point of recording, we are about a year and a quarter into a campaign. This is the longest campaign I have ever been in. Playing as routinely as we play, adventuring as much as we adventure. I think a lot of people with D&D have the experience of starting out a campaign and maybe it fizzling out after a couple of months, or you're in college and someone graduates and then everything kind of goes away from there. But we've been playing our campaign fairly frequently for about, like I said, a year and a quarter at this point. And this is kind of an absurd thing to me just because I've never played a character so frequently. And in our last play session, because for outstanding circumstances, we had to take last weekend off, my character achieved his kind of starting quest. So for those of you not in the know, your characters have, motivations and things like that. Pretty simple explanation, Joe. Yeah, I know, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. But one of the cool things that Cody does as a DM is to create a bond with characters, will have us draw tarot cards with another person at the table. This is coming from the tarot deck of the Curse of Strahd, and he has a big PDF where he reads to you the explanation, and you get to kind of interpret it as you will with the other player. So, in the very first session, me and my best friend, who's also a member of our party and is also my character's best friend in-game, drew a card of basically the conman. And so I decided that our con was going to be that my dwarven cleric with a criminal background was trying to reclaim a historic artifact that had been lost for my church of the Church of Gustav, because over the years, all religions had been more or less declared illegal. And so, I was trying to think of what would be a good artifact for, a trickster god who enjoyed food and wine and cheer and was popular amongst bards and things like that. And I was thinking, it kind of hit me. It sounded very similar to the Ghost of Christmas Present from A Christmas Carol. If you've ever read that book, the Ghost of Christmas Present is a large Santa Claus-ish man, or Father Christmas if you're listening in the UK, and, a large cherubic man, and he has a horn that he carries around with him, and when they're walking through the poor districts, Scrooge notices that he's pouring his horn over the food of poor families, and he goes, Spirit, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, this horn is filled with Christmas cheer, and it makes the food taste better, and it makes the families happier. And Scrooge goes, well, I noticed that when we were amongst the home of rich people and, other kind of upper crust of society's people, you weren't giving them any of your horn of plenty. And the Spirit looks at him and goes, they've already been given enough. My job is to give those who are the suffering amongst us a little bit of happiness, especially at this time of year. And I thought that was a really neat idea. And so I kind of adapted it a little bit to the Horn of Gustav, which did a couple of things which, according to the legends that I was reading, helped with persuasion, because it made food and wine a little bit more potent, and it had a couple of other magical properties. And so, during this time, Joel and I were given advantages on our rolls. We had achieved the parameters of our main quest, or this side quest, if we convinced the party to do things to help us discover the origins of the Horn of Gustav, which we did very subtly, very slyly for about a year. At the end of the last session, Omgram has been given the Horn of Gustav. At this point, it's actually maybe 2 sessions ago. But anyways, I was given the horn, and it has 3 magical properties. Once a week, I can summon 13 Dwarven Berserkers to come and fight for me, which is awesome. Once a day, I can do the spell Create Food and Water. And then the last thing is that I get 1 wish when I blow the horn as loud as I can. I've not yet decided what that wish is going to be, but I have some ideas. I need to talk to Cody about them. But the next play session that we were in was mainly combat focused, and so it hit me as we were finishing, what happens next for Umgrum? And to, a certain extent as well, what happens next to Finn? We've achieved what we're going to achieve and what our card had us do. So, I've had a couple of thoughts about this. I still need to talk to the person playing Finn, whose name is Jolo, about, do we just come up with a new con? Do we draw new cards because maybe our characters have changed to a point where being conman doesn't necessarily suit us anymore? It's kind of a unique thing because it's nothing I've ever experienced before. The only time I've ever had a character come close to achieving their main quest is in a campaign in college. My DM thought it would be fun to do a time skip and a universe skip, and we all kind of leveled up a bunch to, make us more suitable for this basically Final Fantasy VII world that he was really excited about us playing in. So this is, the question of, this is one of the really cool things about Dungeons & Dragons, I feel, which is, in many ways we've closed the book on what was our entirely original motivation. But from this point onward, I don't know quite what happens next for Umgrum. And in a lot of ways, that's really cool. Last week, we talked about retiring characters or giving characters a fond farewell or a fond send-off. I'm not done with Umgrum yet. I think there's still a lot more fun things that can be done with Umgrum. I've spent a lot of time thinking about his character as of late. I use this really cool tool called Adventurer's Codex, which is a free plug for them, which is a kind of, it's a cloud-based online character sheet, and one of the things that they had in it was a section for note-taking. And I sat down, and I really, really thought about it as I was transferring my character sheet. Where does my character stand with the rest of the party? Where is his motivation right now? And I don't think he's ready to retire yet. I think this might be his last mission if he makes it out alive, but I need to figure out what's my next motivating factor outside of the main quest, because everyone has a motivation outside of the main quest. At the moment, I'm just trying to figure out what that is. So yeah, this is just this, it's a little section about trying to determine what comes next. I don't know if I necessarily have the answers. Perhaps I can get back to you later. But it was something I wanted to think out, just with you and my friends. If anyone wants to, write suggestions or things like that, if you've ever found yourself in a similar place as me, I'd love to hear your feedback. But it's an interesting aspect of role-playing games that sometimes things can radically change like that. And for me, it's really exciting. I just wanted to let you guys in on that. All right. And then finally, I wanted to talk to you guys about my newest obsession for the moment, I suppose, which is my friend and I just finished Season 5 of Voltron, Legendary Defender on Netflix. So, Legendary Defender, I believe, aired 2 years ago, something like that. It's already on Season 5, because the Netflix season model is kind of like the most absurd thing in the entire world. It actually, now that I'm thinking about it, might be slightly older than I had originally thought. But it is a wonderful reboot of the 80s cartoon Voltron, which I had seen absolutely none of, but I had seen a couple of trailers for this. My friend is absolutely obsessed with mecha animes and was really excited about this, check out this reboot. And one of the earliest things I saw about it was it had really interesting and sensitive portrayals of kind of adult themes. One of the characters suffers from flashbacks to a time that wasn't great in their life. And so Voltron is, an 80s anime about these 5, they're called paladins, who pilot these 5 lion robots, and when they need to, they transform with one another to create Voltron, which is one big robot that has lions for hands and feet. It's a silly premise. I guess no more silly than any mecha anime can be, but I think the thing that really sets it apart from a lot of children's animated television right now, or I guess animated television in general, is just the pedigree of people behind it. It is part of the group of what I'm going to call Team Avatar, which are alumnus of such shows as of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Avatar: The Legend of Korra, which in my opinion are two of the finest animated television programs ever produced. I would just go as so far as to say that if I was ever making a list of my top favorite television programs in general, Avatar would definitely probably crack the top 5. It's that good. If you've never watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think Cody has, so I might save a conversation with him about it. Literally one of the best television programs I've ever watched. And they've gone on, all of them, to do amazing things. So you have Legend of Korra. A group of them went to do the show Young Justice, which originally aired on Cartoon Network and is about to get a 3rd season, which follows a group of superhero sidekicks as they are forming their own team as they reach their teenage years and determine that they want a little bit more responsibility. I know some of them went off to do Star Wars Rebels, which is another really good, solid animated show on the Disney XD, which actually recently just ended. I would highly recommend that show as well. It was the first time I had been excited about Star Wars in a long time, and I believe I started watching it right before Force Awakens came out. So at that point I realized that Star Wars was in good hands if they were trusting them to do this show. But this crew and this team brings all of their wonderful storytelling to Voltron, which, I've watched a couple of earlier episodes, is kind of a fun little cheesy romp. And that's not to say that this one isn't a fun cheesy romp, but it definitely gets to some more heady themes. Like I said, one of the protagonists, Shiro, escapes from an alien prison in the first episode, and throughout season 1, he's getting flashbacks to his time when he was a, gladiator in their basically space jail. Other characters are dealing with lost family members, not knowing who their parentage is. One of the main characters, Allura, she's dealing with the fact that she's basically the last of her kind outside of Karan, who is my second favorite character, who is impeccably voiced by Rhys Darby of Flight of the Conchord and New Zealand comedy fame. If you've ever seen the movie What We Do in the Shadows, he is the head of the werewolves. And my number 1 favorite character is Hunk, who is just an adorable lug who enjoys space food and space cooking. Every season has 1 or 2 really, really solid, fun, funny episodes. In season 2 or season 3, there's this amazing episode called Space Mall, where their flying castle needs to get some replacement parts. And so Karan tells them that they're going to this dangerous trading outpost. And it turns out that over the, centuries of Allura and Karan being asleep, it's just kind of turned into a big old space mall where our wacky, teen protagonists are being chased around by Space Mall Blart Paul Cop. In season 4, there is an amazing episode where Karan gets a space slug in his head and he kind of becomes like a huckster space salesman, and he creates Voltron on ice, more or less, where they're riding around with cardboard lions on their heads. It's a really good show. And then when it gets serious and it gets mythology and mythologizing, it's an amazing show. And so season 5 continues that trend with some of the best space action I've seen, some really amazing fight choreography for their character models, and the season finale is really cool because I honestly don't know where the show is going from here. And I mean that in a really good way. Sometimes you can say that and it's scary. Oh gosh, I don't know where the show can go from here. Maybe they jumped the shark, or I guess in this case jumped the lion. But in this one, there are so many directions the show can go, and because of that I'm really grateful. There are characters whose motivations are unclear. They might be good, they might be evil, we don't know. It's really solid, wonderful storytelling, and I highly recommend that you go and give it a watch because I don't think you'll be disappointed. Plus, the transformation sequence is really, really good. It has really epic, fun music, and at least the first time they transform, my favorite character, Hunk, who is the paladin of the Yellow Lion, shouts, "I'm a leg," which speaks to me on a spiritual level. Cody can attest to this based on my wonderful the characters I like to build. Most of my characters have a little bit of shades of hunk in them, I feel. Alright, so I think this is a good point to wrap it up. Maybe this episode is going to be a little bit shorter. Chances are, too, you're probably not going to be hearing this for a couple of days. We apologize about that. Between schedules, sickness, sound editing, other salacious S words, this one was a kind of a hard one to get out for you guys. But we want to thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you didn't get bored by just hearing my voice going on and on and on and on. But I had a lot of fun. I didn't think it was going to be this easy to fill an episode with content. So please refer to the middle section and or any addendums that Cody might add to it, which is, possible. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to us. Like I said, please find us on iTunes, rate, subscribe, download, things like that. And we will look forward to hearing from you in the future at our social media. And we look forward to talking to you again next week. So, signing off for Fandom Roulette, this is Joe. And as always, stay nerdy, stay super nerdy. Bye.